My name is Hilary Foster. I'm 34 years old. The moment my mother slapped me across the face on Christmas night, I heard something hit the floor. For one terrifying second, I thought it was my grandfather. I spun around. He was still sitting in his wheelchair beside the dining table, trembling. Not from the cold. Not from age. From humiliation. And then my father pointed toward the front door and said 7 words that changed all of our lives forever. Take him and get out of my house. Nobody at that table knew that my grandfather had changed his will 3 months earlier. Nobody knew he had been watching everything. And nobody knew that Christmas dinner would be the last time our family ever sat together under the same roof. My name is Hilary Foster. And this is the story of how my parents threw me and my grandfather out on Christmas. It's also the story of how one secret changed everything. I grew up believing family was supposed to protect each other. Maybe that's why it took me so long to see what was happening. My grandfather, Arthur Foster, wasn't always the frail man everyone ignored. When I was little, he seemed larger than life. He taught me how to ride a bicycle. He taught me how to fish. He showed up at every school recital even when nobody else did. When I was 8 years old and forgot my lines during a school play, I remember spotting him in the audience. He smiled. Suddenly, I wasn't scared anymore. That was Grandpa. He made people feel safe. For most of his life, he worked as a contractor. He built houses across 3 counties. He worked through rainstorms and heat waves. He saved every dollar he could. By the time he retired, he had accumulated several valuable properties and investments. But he never acted wealthy. He drove old trucks, wore the same jackets for years, and always insisted on paying for everyone's birthday dinner. As he got older, things changed. A stroke left him partially paralyzed. His mobility declined. Eventually, he needed a wheelchair. That was when I started noticing something ugly inside my family. People treated him differently. Not with concern. Not with compassion. With impatience. My father was the worst. At first it was subtle. He would sigh whenever Grandpa asked for help. He'd roll his eyes when conversations moved too slowly. He acted as if caring for his own father was some unbearable burden. My mother wasn't much better. She constantly complained about appointments, medication schedules, wheelchair ramps, doctor visits. Everything became an inconvenience. I tried telling myself they were stressed. Caretaking is difficult. Life is busy. Maybe I was being unfair. Then I started hearing things. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly. My parents didn't know I was home. My father was talking. When that inheritance finally comes through, we can sell the lake property. My mother laughed. It's about time. I froze. They weren't discussing Grandpa's health. They were discussing his assets. As if he were already gone. As if he were nothing more than paperwork waiting to happen. That conversation stayed with me. Unfortunately, it wasn't the last one. Over the next 2 years, I noticed countless moments. They rarely visited his room unless someone was watching. Family gatherings became performances. In public, they acted caring. In private, they were cold. Grandpa noticed too. He never complained. That somehow made it worse. One evening, I was helping him organize old photographs. He looked at a picture of my grandmother and smiled sadly. Funny thing about getting old, he said. What? You learn who loves you and who loves what you own. I didn't know how to respond. His eyes stayed fixed on the photograph. I wish I had learned that lesson sooner. I remember feeling a knot in my stomach. Because I knew exactly what he meant. By then I was working as a chef. The hours were exhausting. Long shifts. Late nights. Holiday schedules. But no matter how busy I became, I checked on Grandpa constantly. I took him to appointments. Brought him meals. Helped him with errands. Not because I expected anything. Because he was family. Because he deserved better. Around that time, Grandpa began spending more time with his attorney. Nobody thought much of it. At least not openly. But I noticed my father asking questions. Lots of questions. What did the lawyer want? How long was the meeting? Did he mention finances? Grandpa would simply smile. My father hated that smile. It gave nothing away. 3 months before Christmas, something happened. I stopped by Grandpa's room after work. The attorney had just left. Grandpa looked thoughtful, almost relieved. Everything okay? I asked. He nodded. Better than okay. I sat beside him. He patted my hand. Sometimes people spend years making mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind they don't realize they're making. I laughed. That sounds mysterious. It probably does. He leaned back. Just promise me something. What? No matter what happens, don't let other people's bitterness change who you are. I promised. At the time, I didn't understand why the conversation felt so important. I would soon find out. Christmas arrived faster than expected. I was scheduled to work a partial shift at the restaurant. Afterward, I drove straight to my parents' house carrying trays of food I'd spent hours preparing. The house looked perfect. Lights covered the roof. Decorations filled every window. Christmas music floated through the air. From outside, it looked like a holiday postcard. Inside, it was something else entirely. The atmosphere felt tense. Artificial. Everyone seemed focused on appearances. My father spent most of the evening bragging about future renovations. My mother discussed expensive vacations. My brother, Daniel, couldn't stop talking about luxury cars. The strange thing? None of them had the money for those things. Not yet. But they spoke as if wealth were already guaranteed. As if Grandpa's estate already belonged to them. Grandpa remained quiet throughout dinner. I noticed every time someone ignored him. Every time they interrupted him. Every time they talked over him. Then came dessert. The moment everything exploded. Grandpa accidentally knocked over a glass. Just a glass. Nothing more. The tablecloth got wet. That was it. My father reacted as though a disaster had occurred. Oh, for heaven's sake. The room fell silent. Grandpa immediately apologized. I'm sorry. My father slammed his hand against the table. No, Dad. This is getting ridiculous. I stared at him. What is wrong with you? My father ignored me. He continued speaking directly to Grandpa. We spend all our time cleaning up after you. The old man lowered his eyes. Something inside me snapped. He's your father. My mother jumped in. Don't start, Hilary. No. Somebody needs to. The room became very quiet. I looked around. Nobody defended Grandpa. Nobody. Not one person. I couldn't believe it. He spilled a glass, I said. That's all. My father stood. You have no idea what we deal with. I laughed bitterly. Really? Because I seem to be the only person here who actually helps him. That didn't go over well. My mother's face hardened. Daniel suddenly found his plate fascinating. Nobody spoke. Then Grandpa tried to calm things down. It's Christmas. His voice was gentle. Let's not argue. But it was too late. Years of resentment were pouring out. My father pointed at me. You think you're so righteous. I think basic decency isn't hard. The slap came out of nowhere. 1 second my mother was standing across from me. The next her hand struck my face. The room went silent. Completely silent. I tasted blood. For several seconds nobody moved. Nobody apologized. Nobody looked shocked. That was the worst part. The slap wasn't the problem. The reactions were. Because they acted as if I deserved it. Then my father delivered those 7 words. Take him and get out of my house. I stared at him. Surely he didn't mean it. Surely this was anger talking. Then he walked to the front door and opened it. The freezing winter wind rushed inside. He wasn't bluffing. He wanted us gone. Grandpa looked devastated. I looked at my mother. She said nothing. I looked at my brother. He looked away. That hurt more than anything. Without another word, I wheeled Grandpa toward the door. Nobody stopped us. Nobody changed their mind. Nobody cared. The cold hit immediately. Snow drifted across the driveway. Christmas lights glowed behind us. The front door slammed shut. And just like that, we were standing outside. A disabled 86-year-old man and his granddaughter. On Christmas night, neither of us knew that the people inside that house had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because while they were celebrating what they believed would someday belong to them, a very different future was already waiting. And 3 days later, the first crack in their plans would appear. 3 days later, my phone rang just after sunrise. I had barely slept since Christmas. Grandpa and I were staying in a small extended-stay hotel on the edge of town. The room wasn't fancy. A tiny kitchenette, 2 beds, a table by the window. But it was warm. More importantly, it was peaceful. No shouting. No insults. No pretending. The caller ID displayed the name of Grandpa's attorney. I answered immediately. "Good morning, Hilary." His voice sounded serious. "Is Grandpa awake?" "Yes." "Could both of you come to my office this afternoon?" My stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" There was a brief pause. "No." Then he added something unexpected. "Actually, something is very right." I glanced toward Grandpa. He sat near the window watching snow drift across the parking lot. For the first time in years, he looked calm. When I told him about the call, he simply nodded. "I thought it might be soon." "What might be soon?" He smiled. "You'll see." That afternoon we arrived at the attorney's office. The building wasn't impressive. Just a brick structure with modest offices. Inside, however, several familiar faces were already waiting. My father, my mother, my brother Daniel, and my Aunt Rebecca. The moment my parents saw us, their expressions changed. Not to guilt, not to shame, to annoyance. As though our presence ruined their day. My father crossed his arms. "What are you doing here?" I nearly laughed. The attorney had invited us. Yet somehow he acted as though we were intruding. Before I could answer, the attorney entered the conference room. "Thank you all for coming." Everyone took their seats. The atmosphere felt strange. Tense. Anticipatory. Grandpa sat quietly at the end of the table. The attorney opened a folder. Then he looked directly at my grandfather. "Mr. Foster, before we begin, would you like to say anything?" Grandpa folded his hands. For a moment he simply looked around the room. His children. His family. The people he had spent decades loving and supporting. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "I spent most of my life believing that family should be rewarded." Nobody moved. But eventually I realized something. The room remained silent. Character matters more than blood. My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked confused. The attorney nodded. Then he began reading. What happened next changed everything. The first section covered personal possessions. Family photographs. Keepsakes. Small items. Nothing dramatic. My father seemed bored. Daniel checked his watch twice. Then the attorney reached the estate section. That's when everyone suddenly became interested. Grandpa owned more than most people realized. Several rental properties. Investment accounts. The lake house. Savings. Land holdings. The total value exceeded $3 million. A stunned silence settled over the room. Even I hadn't known the exact amount. The attorney continued reading. My father leaned forward. My mother practically smiled. Daniel looked like a child waiting to open presents. Then came the important part. The majority beneficiary of the estate shall be. The attorney paused. Everyone stared. Hilary Foster. The room exploded. What? My father practically shouted it. My mother stood so fast her chair nearly tipped over. Daniel's face turned white. I was too shocked to speak. The attorney continued reading. The beneficiary shall receive the lake house, all rental properties, 70% of investment holdings, and controlling authority over all remaining assets. I couldn't breathe. My father slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. The attorney calmly continued. The remaining assets shall be distributed among designated charities supporting elderly care, disability assistance, and veteran services. My Aunt Rebecca blinked repeatedly. Daniel looked as if someone had physically punched him. Then came the line that completely shattered them. The children of Arthur Foster shall receive $1 each. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was almost surreal. Then my mother laughed. Not because she found it funny. Because she couldn't believe it. $1. The attorney nodded. $1. My father turned toward Grandpa. You can't be serious. Grandpa looked directly at him. I've never been more serious in my life. The anger in my father's eyes was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I am your son. And I was your father. The room became silent again. Grandpa continued. For years I watched how you treated me. Nobody interrupted. I watched how you spoke about me. My father looked away. I watched how you discussed my property before I was even gone. The words landed like stones. My mother's face drained of color. Grandpa wasn't finished. I gave all of you countless opportunities. You thought I didn't notice. He looked around the room. But old age doesn't make people blind. Nobody had a response. Because everything he said was true. Then he turned toward me. The only person who treated me like a human being instead of an investment was Hilary. My eyes filled with tears. I didn't do anything special. Exactly. His smile was sad. You did what should have been normal. For the first time since Christmas, I saw genuine emotion on my father's face. Fear. Because he finally understood. The inheritance he had been counting on for years was gone. Completely gone. The attorney finished reading. The meeting ended shortly afterward. But the real drama was only beginning. Within a week, the phone calls started. My mother called first. She cried. Apologized. Said Christmas had been a misunderstanding. I listened quietly. Then I asked one question. If Grandpa had left everything to you, would you still be calling? Silence. That told me everything. A few days later, Daniel called. He wanted to reconnect. Wanted family dinners. Wanted fresh starts. Again, I asked a simple question. Where was that energy when Grandpa was sitting outside in the snow? He had no answer. Then my father appeared at the hotel. He didn't know we were preparing to move. He knocked repeatedly until I opened the door. The moment he saw me, he began talking. Not apologizing. Negotiating. As though this were a business transaction. We can work something out. I stared at him. We're family. I almost laughed. Family. Now he remembered that word. The same man who had thrown us into the cold was suddenly concerned about family. I think you should leave. His expression darkened. You'd choose money over your own parents? The irony was unbelievable. No. I met his eyes. That's what you did. Then I closed the door. A month later, Grandpa and I moved into the lake house. It sat beside a quiet stretch of water surrounded by pine trees. The place was beautiful. Peaceful. The kind of home people imagine when they think about retirement. Grandpa loved it. Every morning he sat on the porch with coffee. Every evening we watched the sunset over the lake. For the first time in years, he seemed genuinely happy. Word about the inheritance spread through the family quickly. Some relatives supported Grandpa. Others criticized him. Apparently, many people believed children were entitled to inheritance regardless of behavior. Grandpa disagreed. So did I. One afternoon, while we were sitting by the water, I asked him a question. Do you regret it? He thought carefully. Then he shook his head. No. Not even a little? No. His answer came immediately. I regret waiting so long. That stayed with me. Because he wasn't talking about money. He was talking about boundaries. About self-respect. About refusing to reward cruelty. Over the next year, things changed dramatically. Several properties generated steady income. I expanded my culinary career. Eventually, I opened a small restaurant. Not because I needed the money. Because cooking was what I loved. Grandpa became my unofficial consultant. He sat near the entrance several afternoons each week. Customers adored him. Children especially. He always had stories. Always had jokes. Always had time. Meanwhile, my parents' situation worsened. Not because of anything I did. Because they had built their future around an inheritance they never earned. The expensive plans disappeared. The luxury dreams vanished. Reality arrived. And reality wasn't nearly as generous as Grandpa had been. The strangest part? I never felt victorious. People love revenge stories because they expect dramatic payback. Explosive confrontations. Public humiliation. Spectacular justice. Real life isn't usually like that. The greatest consequence my parents faced wasn't losing money. It was losing trust. They revealed who they were. Once people see that, it becomes difficult to hide again. Nearly 2 years after Christmas, my father called unexpectedly. His voice sounded older. Tired. Different. "Can I talk to Grandpa?" I handed over the phone. The conversation lasted almost 30 minutes. Afterward, I asked what happened. Grandpa smiled faintly. He apologized. "Did you believe him?" He stared out toward the lake. "I think he finally understood something." "What?" "That inheritance was never what he lost." A few months later, my father visited. Not to argue. Not to negotiate. Not to ask for money. Just to visit. The meeting was awkward. Painfully awkward. But it was honest. For the first time in years, nobody pretended. Healing wasn't immediate. Trust wasn't magically restored. Some wounds take time. Others leave scars forever. But genuine accountability had finally appeared. And accountability is where real change begins. Grandpa passed away peacefully the following spring. He was 90 years old. The night before he died, we sat together on the porch. The lake reflected the stars. The air was cool. Everything felt quiet. He looked at me and smiled. "You know what makes me happiest?" I shook my head. "What?" "I wasn't wrong about you." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened instantly. He squeezed my hand. "You protected my dignity when it would have been easier to stay silent." A tear rolled down my cheek. He smiled again. Then he looked toward the water. "That's worth more than any estate." Those were among the last words he ever spoke to me. Today, I still live in the lake house. The restaurant is thriving. The charities Grandpa supported continue helping people. His legacy lives on exactly as he wanted. Not through money. Not through property. Through values. Sometimes people ask whether I got revenge. The answer surprises them. No, I didn't get revenge. Grandpa got justice. There's a difference. Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is allowing people to experience the consequences of their own choices. My parents threw us out into the cold because they believed Grandpa's value existed only in what he owned. They spent years focusing on an inheritance. In the end, they overlooked the one thing that truly mattered: the man himself. And that's the lesson I carry with me every Christmas. Treat people well before you know what they can give you. Because someday the gifts, the money, and the property won't matter. What will matter is how you made people feel. My parents learned that lesson too late. I was fortunate enough to learn it from the man who mattered most. My grandfather, Arthur Foster. The richest person I have ever known. Not because of what he left behind, but because of who he chose to be.